What's up, everybody? How's it going? So, for this episode of the University's podcast, we're up to number 8 now. This will probably be the last one before the Christmas holidays roll around, because I know everybody usually gets a little bit busy. I, myself, very busy with exams, essays, and stuff to do, so there won't be an episode, the 9th one, that would be 2 Mondays from now, which I think is the 18th, or no. Might be the 18th or the 19th, something around there. So there won't be an episode for that date, but there will be one for the next one, and and then we have the 10th one coming up, which I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about, but I promise they will all be answered when that episode rolls around. But anyways, who we got on deck for today is Joshua A. Singer Johnson. So Josh was a former page here at the House of Commons. I know that's a huge trend for a lot of my guests, but they've done some cool shit, so we're gonna keep rocking with them. But Josh last year took a year off from school after his first year, and he decided to run for what's very similar for the Ontario people here as an MPP, but in British Columbia it's called an MLA. So that's what he ran as for the Green Party, actually, in his home riding of North Vancouver. But that'll get all corrected. If any of this is wrong, it'll all be fixed in the podcast. But so he decided to run for that last year. He didn't win, unfortunately. But as someone who is our age, which at that time he was only 19 years old, running for an MLA, which is not completely unheard of. There's a conservative fellow down in the Niagara region who won, and I think he's 20, 21, 22, so very, very young as well. But it's not completely unheard of, but definitely very rare, and extremely rare for if he would have won. It would have been, I don't know if there would have been someone that young to win a seat from none of the two major parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives, that we have here in Canada. But anyways, Josh is super, super eccentric. He loves to talk politics, loves to get really heated, is incredibly fiery. He's got a great passion for issues that he's very proud of, specifically climate change, which is hopefully something that we'll get to talk a little bit about, and pipelines, which are a huge issue for the province of British Columbia, and the shipping of crude oil. So give it up for Joshua A. Singer Johnson. Okay, so I'm here with Josh. Josh, how's it going?
Pretty good, thanks, Lucas.
How have you been doing? I haven't seen you in a little while. It's been like 2 weeks, 3. The last time I saw you was at Graham's, probably.
Sounds about right. Yeah, it's been a while. Been quite busy and quite antisocial.
The thing is, though, is like sometimes it's been a little while too since I've seen this, but I see you running. I see you running on campus all the time, because you're trained. You were training for that marathon. I don't know if you still are. I
actually ran the marathon more than a month ago now, October 22nd, I think it was. And I haven't really been running just for training since, but I got used to running. So I wear my running shoes around every day. I'm wearing them right now. And I'm always late for things, so it's perfect because I can just run from place to place. It works out great.
I that's definitely a physical activity that I would love to be able to pick up, running. I go to the gym a lot, and I play basketball too, but in terms of just running, I don't do that at all. I don't just go for a run. I don't know what it is. I find that the most annoying thing is the cheap Apple fucking headphones, the earbuds that fall out. I can't get them to stay in my ears when I run, and they fall out of my ears all the time, and it just like you're trying to get in a groove, and you have a good song going or something, and then it just fall out of your ears, and then you completely just lose any momentum.
Well, I think for me it depends on the day, on whether I can get myself out and going for a run. And some days I start running, and from start to finish it's just a struggle, and I don't want to be running, and I have to push myself every step. Sometimes you get in a groove and you just want to keep going, keep running.
You hit that runner's high, where it's just you just hit that moment, you're just I could just go forever.
And no matter what, I always feel great afterwards. And I know that's what's going to happen once the run is over. So it's just a question of whether I can push myself to start and continue so I can reap the rewards, if you will, at the end of it all.
This is a good prognosis for life. so something to follow for life. Anyways, what I wanted to talk to you about today is last year. Your year of I don't know what to like. Thinking of a word, mayhem, destruction, something maybe
Those
not
are
something
negative words.
Yeah, maybe not something so negative. Maybe a year of learning, a year technically of running as well, but running for something much different. So you correct me if I'm wrong, but you ran for North Vancouver MLA. Is that correct?
I was the British Columbia Provincial Green Party candidate for North Vancouver-Seymour.
That is a title. That is a title that you can put on a desk, and it would be too big for those normal title cards. Anyways, what I wanted to talk to you about is why you decided to run. Like, so we had finished our first year, and did you? And no, and you had stayed for the summer to finish out your page contract.
Yeah. So after high school, I was a page in the House of Commons. I was a page for a full year, right from August of 2015 up until I was in Ottawa working until the end of June 2016. And I think working in the House of Commons, especially working in a new House of Commons with a new government coming in, and people in general in Canada were very optimistic about what the government was going to be doing, how the Liberals were going to be very different from the Conservatives. But from day one, I realized that they might say different things, but they behave in exactly the same way. There seems to be this aversion in Canadian politics to actually honestly answering questions and telling the truth and really just saying anything of substance. And, people ascribed it at first to the youth and the inexperience of some of Trudeau's ministers. But it's deeper than that. I think it's an across-the-board problem where politicians don't say what they believe and don't act based on what they believe. I think too much of politics, especially seeing behind the scenes, is really run from the back room. That individual MPs don't have a lot of say, don't have a lot of power. And it's sort of a disgusting massacre of the way our electoral system is supposed to work, where we elect representatives to represent us in government because we can't all represent ourselves. The system is 5,000 years old, dating back to ancient Athens at its most basic. And I think over that time, it's really lost some of its value, and it especially loses its value when MPs don't represent their communities. It defeats the purpose of even having MPs. I think with the whip vote system and with the way politics works in Canada, we'd be better off getting rid of ridings altogether and just voting by party, because it would have the same result in the kind of legislation we're seeing from the government. And I mean, there are a few exceptions to that. There are a few good MPs within every party. Unfortunately, I don't think any of them has power. But I was always drawn to the Green Party, partly because I'm a British Columbian and I'm an environmentalist. But I think what really pushed me over the edge was their policy on whip voting, their policy on, not to use a Trudeau phrase, but openness and transparency. I say with air quotes.
Nice.
That's a line we heard all the time from the government while they were being the opposite of open and transparent.
And I think we still hear that a lot.
Yeah. And I think that line is something that the Green Party actually embodied. When I was a candidate, I got up on the stage and I didn't have a speech and I didn't have to read from the party platform. People would ask me a question and I would answer it. So I think mainly that is what got me off my ass out the door and into the candidate seat. It's just wanting to change the system and wanting to just be honest about it. I think honesty is something that we overlook a lot in our society today, and I think that's a real shame.
Well, I think one of the most important values you can have just as a human being is the value of telling the truth and always searching for honesty and being and being open and transparent, like you said, but truly in all of not just your sayings, but in your actions as well, in looking for the truth and searching for the truth. And to bring back to your point, talking about like the system that we're currently in, I know that I talked to Graham about this too, but to borrow a phrase from Joe Rogan, it's a system that we've been using since we were writing with feathers. We don't write with fucking feathers anymore. We write on computers. So like this idea that like an electoral system shouldn't change with the changes that we have in technology, and we as humans now embody as well too, is ridiculous. Like, we shouldn't just rely on this system, and the system has served us well in the past. I honestly do think democracy is the best system we have. It might seem very trying and taxing on the people who think that nothing gets done. That's the classic phrase for democracy, that nothing happens. But I do think that it is the best system that we can possibly have. But I do think that it needs to change to represent something that we are now, is something as opposed to we were thousands, hundreds of years ago. But on your decision to run, I think that's very noble of you to look at yourself as a young person and to say, like, I can honestly make a difference. Because there's a lot of people that talk the talk, but they rarely walk the walk. And running for an MLA when you're 19 years old is walking the fucking walk.
I actually, just a little point, I was 19 the day of the election, but I was actually 18 when I was nominated by the Green Party to be a candidate.
Well, fuck me, right? Like, Jesus. Where do you begin in that process? Like, from deciding that I want to run, or is it like, it might not even be that decision comes first. Like, were you approached by the Green Party for your interest in running, or did you come to them saying, like, I want to be the candidate?
It was actually the opposite. The opposite of what you said first. Yeah. After a particularly long day in the House of Commons, as a page, I can't even remember what it was that set me off that day, but I remember what it was, in fact. It was the Liberal Party proposing amendments to the rules of the House of Commons to spite the NDP and the Conservatives for almost beating them in a vote the day before. Yeah. Not because it had any intrinsic value or it was going to by any means improve debate in the House of Commons. It was just, they screw with us, so we're going to screw with them right over. Yeah. So, and I was so frustrated, and I had to sit there in the Liberal lobby while they were plotting this out. And the whip was there. He's telling us how he's going to enjoy it, and I was just sitting there in the background trying my absolute hardest to not burst into flame.
Just fucking lose it. Oh.
So I sent an email to the Green Party general email that night, told them I was interested in becoming a candidate, and a sort of slow response. They sent me some emails, I sent them some emails, and then my page contract officially ended at the end of August. So then I sent them another email saying that it's time for me to get started. I met with some people involved in the Green Party, and they sent me about 40 pages of forms that I filled in with every detail of everything I'd ever done in my entire life. And then, I sent it off. I waited, and then right before the Christmas holidays, actually, I got word back that they accepted my application, and that since no other candidates presented themselves, I was the candidate. I was going to be on the ballot.
What was that moment like when you realized that I am an official candidate of an official party?
It took about a minute to set in. I was actually working at Grouse Mountain, which is a ski resort in Vancouver, and I was standing in the control room of the cable car, and I was talking on the phone with him, and I was answering his questions, I was nodding, and then I just sat there for about a minute. And then I had this big smile on my face, and I was bouncing up and down, and I ran down the stairs, and it was really exciting. And then after about a day, it turned into panic because I realized I had no idea what on earth I was doing. And I feel like it was somewhere between those two emotions throughout the entire campaign. So, something between joy at the fact that I get to do this, I get to go out there and talk to people and just say what I believe, and panic of having no idea what I'm doing,
Yeah.
no idea how to organize a campaign, no idea what I'm supposed to say to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as it went on, it was less and less panic and more joy. And you sort of get into this groove of campaigning where I was working 10 hours a day. I'm somebody who's been a major procrastinator my whole life.
Yeah.
Like, ridiculously so. But I found myself not procrastinating. It was taking over pretty much all of my life, and it was a good thing. It was a cool thing. And I think now, looking back on it, I have real mixed feelings about it. I'm thrilled to have done it. It was a great experience, but I always regret when I'm talking about it with people that I never talk about it with anyone who can empathize, because running for office is such an uncommon thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, it's so far out.
Especially at our age. Like, there's no one that besides yourself that I know who's even like come close to deciding that they want to run. There's a lot of people who are interested in getting into politics at some point, but they're talking about like their 30s or like maybe even late 20s, but no one at our age is like right after like first year of university, or even right after, like as soon as they finish high school, are thinking like, I'm getting into politics right away.
I think that's a huge problem
with
the way our system works. I think the fact that it is so foreign, and that 99% of the population has never even considered running for office. In a democratic system, I think we'd be so much more well served if all the people who don't get engaged at all, who don't participate in forums, who might not even vote, I think they probably have a lot to say, and I think they'd probably do a lot better job governing than all the people who are currently involved in the system. And, you know, I'd say myself included probably. And I think in a way it's the politicians' own fault by not listening to what people say and not being honest with people. They're making people disrespect the system and have no time for politics and think, oh, they don't represent me, it's not important, why should I bother caring about politics? And I think fundamentally we just have to change the system from the ground up. There's so many things that I think need to happen that aren't happening, from the way we elect MPs, the way party whipping goes, and even the way we learn about the electoral system. I was just recently in the House of Commons, maybe a week ago, with one of my friends, and she's very smart, but she's not politically involved. It's never been her area, and I realized that she had absolutely no idea what was going on, no idea how the debate worked, no idea really how all the laws that rule over her were made and how they can be changed. And I think that that's probably almost everybody in the country. And I think that goes all the way back to the education system, where, you know, you might spend a week or two learning about how a bill becomes a law, but you don't really feel a part of it. There's no connection. That's actually one of my favorite points in the Green Party platform in BC, and it was such a minor point that it is almost not even of note, but I thought it was really important. They wanted to lower the voting age from 18 to 16 in BC, so that and then you can integrate that with the school program. So when you're learning in grade 11 how the political system works, you can also register to vote and then actually vote.
No, I think you hit on a lot of key points there, and like just some things that are coming to mind as you were talking is like, I wonder how many people who are in politics have like the traditional political science degree. Like I feel like a lot of the politicians come from one specific frame of mind, and they don't come from anywhere else. Like, all of our politicians come from, like, all of them are mostly university educated. They all come from the social sciences for the majority, maybe a few from business. But
well, I think, like, if you look at the composition of the House of Commons, of the 338 MPs, I think almost 100 of them were lawyers beforehand.
Yeah.
And another 60 or so are business owners.
Yeah.
So you see huge overrepresentation by those two groups in politics. And scientists, teachers, there are some, but really not as much. And you really, like, university education, I think something like 90% of the elected politicians are university educated.
Yeah.
So, I mean, well, even for me, as somebody who's been politically engaged my whole life, before I came to university, I really didn't have any understanding of how the system works. Yeah. And if I hadn't come to university, I probably still wouldn't have any idea how it worked.
Yeah, so I think that's a key thing right there, is that we like to engage a wider demographic of people beyond like the university setting, beyond the law setting, and beyond the business setting, which is like the three main areas where you can grab politically inclined people. But beyond that, we need to reach beyond that to engage a population of people that we kind of ignore and that aren't really that maybe who might not even vote, but let alone want to run at all or want to be involved in any way politically beyond writing their name down on a ballot.
Well, I think, like you heard in the federal election, the line of the day that all three major leaders, Tom Mulcair, Justin Trudeau, Stephen Harper, they were all talking about the middle class, this fascination with what the middle class want and how we can make life better for the middle class, and more practically, how much we can reduce the taxes on the middle class. Yeah. And I think that the idea of the middle class is really exclusive. It really ignores the fact that there are people who are not even in the middle class. Yeah. And those are the people who are the least likely to get involved in politics. And as a result of them not getting involved, politicians don't talk to them because their votes don't matter as much, which, leads to them being even less inclined to participate in the political system because it doesn't represent them. And if we're going to have a representative democratic system, which I'm neither here nor there on personally, but if it's going to be a representative system where you have somebody representing you, then you actually have to be represented by that person for it to work. And if you go to a non-representative system, if you were to move to a direct democratic system, then there's a whole host of issues with that. Like, how do you get everyone to participate? And at the end of the day, I think the single biggest problem with our democracy right now is the fact that people who really should be participating in it don't participate.
Do you think that we could ever get to that direct democratic system? I'm thinking now, like, with the use of the internet, and nearly, like, almost everyone has access to the internet, or has at least heard of the internet.
No, I think we could. I think it's a ways down the road for sure for a fully direct democratic system, but I certainly think it's possible if, MPs have maybe 4 votes a week, if that. Yeah. So if everyone in the country gets a notification on their smartphone that says, "This is the bill, how would you like to vote?" Yeah. I think it could work, honestly.
The issues that come about are like how easy the system is to hack into, and like there are huge problems with that. And then like if for example you go out into the woods and you don't bring your phone with you, then what? Like your voice doesn't count, and like you have to kind of like plan your time around constantly being politically involved, and people might not want to do that, but like it's certainly an idea. Like it's something.
Well, there's legitimate questions based on security, based on whether we can actually get people to participate in it. Yeah. But my thinking is, how many people go on Instagram and how many times per day? And if the voting system, the political system, really is as simple as that, then we could potentially see double the population that currently votes in elections participating on their phones. Yeah. And that's an ambitious system. I'm certainly not suggesting we move to that in the next 5 years. Yeah. Because I think you have to get there with time. But I think even just starting with electronic voting in general and making it so that it's more accessible, more convenient for people to vote. That was probably what I was most disappointed with on the Electoral Reform Committee that was established in the House of Commons last year. Yeah. Was they completely rejected the ideas of mandatory voting and electronic voting, both of which I think have value if you want to encourage as many people as possible to vote. And that's exactly it. And that touches on both issues, I think.
Yeah. So for your campaign, just to focus on that. Like, what do you think is the hardest part about running a campaign?
The hardest part, honestly, for me, the hardest part was organizing all the things that I wasn't supposed to be doing. I found, it's just, as funny as it may sound, I found being a candidate to be very easy. I had a great time. I'd go knock on doors and talk to people and tell them what I thought, and they'd tell me what I thought, and I'd give them my little brochure and hand them a button that had what I stood for on it. And I'd go to the debates and I'd take notes and I'd answer the questions that people asked me, and I found that to be not difficult at all.
Yeah.
The hard part is organizing people to volunteer for you, organizing events, spaces, organizing canvases, and like that's all things that politicians who run major campaigns, they hire a full staff in their office to run this campaign. Yeah. My campaign was run out of 2 basements and a minivan.
Nice.
And
nice. The way that it should be. The way that it should be run. And
yet, you know what? With that completely limited resource, I got 20% of the vote almost. I got about
That's amazing.
18.5%. I got 5,208 votes. 5,207 if I don't count my own vote, which I don't really, because I don't think I earned that one.
Every vote matters. Every vote matters. Yeah, that's truly incredible. The fact that you were able to engage with so many. Do you find that people were like really receptive to like when you were canvassing?
Well, it was interesting. I found like a lot of people. Well, first of all, not that many people hate the Green Party for starters, so that helps. Not a lot of people were slamming the door in my face as soon as I turned up. There were some, but it was the minority. And I think I was expecting to be disrespected for being young a lot more than I actually was. I was expecting it to be, like a majority of the time when I'm talking to older people, for them to not take me as seriously because of my age. But I really didn't find that at all. I think people... Not to sound too cocky, but I think people might have been impressed with me, and they saw that I was
for sure,
I was out there and doing something, and I think I earned a lot of respect that way. But that being said, over the course of the campaign, I knocked on just shy of 5,000 doors, about 4,800. In a riding, to be fair, a riding has about 42,000 homes in it, so not by any means a majority of the houses did I knock on, and I actually got more votes than doors I knocked on. When considering
so that's.
But I know for a fact that not every door I knocked on, voted for me. I had a lot of people tell me who they were voting for, not me. Some people slammed the door right in my face. But I'm curious. I think a lot of that has to do with the party generally. The Green Party did very well. Maybe they heard me at the all candidates debate. Maybe they liked what I had to say. But I'm really not even sure where my own support came from, to be honest. Well, it's still kind of a surreal thing to even think that over 5,000 people thought I would be the best person to represent their interest in the legislative assembly.
I think it's the freshness factor. Like the fact that you are someone completely new and not being churned out from the political system, that you've been a lawyer for 10 years, I know the system really well, you've done all this and this and this, and like whatever, like that perfect politician design, but like very much in the way that it aided Donald Trump and negatively in the fact that he's completely out of left field. Like the same benefit arose for you too. The fact that you're young, you're fresh, and you're willing to talk to people, and like of course I wasn't there, but I genuinely believe that you probably had good answers to the questions and exchanges that you had with people. Like if you were asked a question, you would answer them with that honest, with that openness. That
openness and transparency.
With openness and transparency, but you actually answered them with that, as opposed to just giving them like the fluff that they're used to hearing.
Well, I think maybe that's a part of it. Certainly not everyone I talked to liked my answers. Yeah. But I'd like to think that even if they didn't like what I was saying, maybe they respected the fact that I was saying it. You know, I didn't try to please everyone.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I felt myself tempted to go down that road.
Yeah.
You know, I met a woman who was very receptive to the Green Party and thought we were great. But then she went on a 5-minute rant about marijuana and how it's the most dangerous drug around and how it's so preposterous that the government wants to legalize marijuana. And she's like, I know you've never done marijuana, young man, because you're a respectful and intelligent young man who's above such things. And I don't even know. Like, part of me wanted to respond and say, yeah, of course I've never done marijuana. I think it's awful. This degradation to our society must be stopped at all costs. But, I mean, that's not true.
Yeah.
So, I can in good conscience get up and say I don't support the legalization of marijuana.
Yeah.
When I absolutely support the legalization of marijuana. And I think that maybe a lot of politicians start off with good intentions, but from pressure, maybe from themselves, and I think especially from the parties, they become these jaded political figures that answer questions with more questions and with fluff words and the classic. They ask you a question and you say, oh, well, it was the other guy's fault. Yeah. The Liberals are still saying that when they get asked questions about the economy or the environment or anything.
Even
they say,
though now it's been...
we're doing a great job, but the Conservatives mess it up so bad that now it's going
to take years.
We're just making it better. So trust us. We're better than them.
I wonder what's the expiry date on, like, before they themselves even stop saying that. Like they're obviously they're still saying it now, but like, do they like if they get reelected, like, will they realize like 6 years afterwards it's just like probably shouldn't say this anymore?
Well, I think or is it just because I think Canadians and people in general, especially with the internet, have a short attention span. Yeah. And Stephen Harper was so egregious and so evident in his attacks on democracy that people still remember him. But I think you give it another election cycle and that'll be in the past. And people will have forgotten about him. And I think at that point, they're not going to be able to use that argument anymore. But I think they know that because they're using it to their advantage. I look back at electoral reform where they dumped it, I think, early enough in their mandate that by the time the election rolls around in 2 years, everyone will have forgotten about it altogether. So I think the Liberal Party, while I may not agree with them, I think they're shrewd enough to realize they can't just go on attacking Stephen Harper forever. I don't know what their next line will be, but I feel certain that I will not appreciate it. It's
because now we have a party that they like. That Canadians like. That's the reason that we don't need electoral reform.
Yes. We only wanted to change the system because the bad guys were in power.
But now they're the good guys.
Now that everyone in Canada loves us, we don't need a new system. We just needed a new government all along.
What was it like to run for a party that doesn't have like the funds like the Liberals or the Conservatives have? Like, because like you said, like it was out of what, 2 basements and in a minivan, as opposed to a candidate that has teams of people organizing a campaign.
Well, I don't know that matters too much in the modern era with the internet, which is where a lot of the campaigning goes on. I think, well, I'll preface it by saying within the Green Party, my campaign was relatively well funded. I took advantage of laws that I disagree with that allow certain people to contribute more than, say, $100. Like, the contribution limits in BC during the last election were non-existent. I could have gotten $1 million from anyone from anywhere in the world, and it would have counted as a political donation to my campaign.
Nice.
And I don't believe that that's the right thing. I think there should be a low limit on campaign financing. But it just so happened that there was a very kind old man who wanted to contribute several $1,000s to my campaign. Wow. So, I mean, I accepted, and it funded all the things I was able to do. I had signs with my face and my name on them, and we managed to print off enough pamphlets to deliver to about 10,000 houses over the course of the campaign. So I think from that respect, I was lucky.
Yeah.
Also had the benefit of having Elizabeth May's star power on my side. My financial agent knew her personally and was able to get her to come do an event and a fundraiser.
Shout out to Elizabeth May.
Which was absolutely phenomenal and completely surreal, because there I was all of a sudden standing on a stage with the Canadian politician, probably who I respect the most out of anyone in the entire country. And she's talking to me as an equal, and we're having a discussion about democracy and electoral reform, and it's just flowing naturally. And then afterwards, you know, she raised $8,000 for my campaign and personally donated to my campaign. So it is quite something. I was sort of blown away by that. But I think what we were going up against was a Liberal candidate who had enough money in the bank to print off a 20-page booklet with all the people who think she's great and give her glowing endorsements. Nice. Nothing about her actual policy, but she sent that out to every single house in the riding multiple times. And even some houses that weren't even in the riding, but that were close to the riding, just so they would know.
Waste of paper.
Well, I think so. I certainly wasn't convinced by the one that arrived in my mailbox. But it's hard to say what the difference would have been, but I think the reason the Green Party doesn't have those funds is because they don't accept donations from massive corporations and unions, and they don't, in general, appeal to the people that are going to fund these political parties to no end. So I think it's definitely a positive thing that I ran for a party with limited resources.
Yeah. No, like, it's really tough when you're trying to think of reasons that people should get involved in politics, and you're trying to show them that, like, the system does work as long as you work with the system. But then you have situations like you just described where you have corporations that donate hundreds of thousands of dollars to parties and to individual people, and it's just devastating to me morally to hear that. Like, I just sit here and want to sulk and just be like as an individual person who obviously does not make anywhere close to that money and is not involved in any corporation whatsoever. I'm sure when people hear this, they don't want me to be involved into any political campaign whatsoever. But that's why I enjoy doing a podcast like this, is because I really embrace the ability for me to be able to say what I want to say and to express my views in a way that is unhindered by my political allegiance or my corporate backing. And I wish that system existed in politics, that politicians could be real with people and not have to worry about the check that Shell Oil wrote for them for $100,000 or $200,000.
Yeah, I think contrary to what the U.S. Supreme Court seems to think, I personally don't believe that corporations are people. I don't think corporations should have any rights in our political system.
That's ridiculous.
Because, you know, politicians don't represent corporations. They represent people. Corporations are completely arbitrary constructs. And you know what? Same thing with unions. I have great respect for unions. I think that the more jobs that are unionized, the better. But I don't think that it's their place to be getting involved in politics and donating hundreds of thousands of dollars. That was by far my least favorite part of being a candidate, was knowing that I had to ask people for money because I had to fund my campaign. And if I didn't raise money, then I wouldn't be able to have any literature or put up any signs, and nobody would even know who I was.
If all corporations are people, then all those people are sociopaths. like they only have a singular goal, and that goal is to make as much money as possible. So all of their actions as a person, if you want to call a corporation a person, is then to make money. But no one fucking acts like that. There's not a single person out there whose only goal is to make as much money as possible. There are a lot of people who that might be their main goal. That might be 99.9% of their life, but they do have a part of them that is beyond that. And that can be for other nefarious means just as much, but it's not just to make money. And that's all corporations care about, is the making and continuation of money. But no one acts like that. No one in their right mind acts like that.
No, that's a fair point. I think a giant, massive corporation that, they make billions of dollars per year, and they have tens of thousands of employees, and they argue, well, you know what? Our interest does matter because so many people depend on us for their livelihood. But the corporation isn't designed with the interest of their employees at heart. And, I think you're absolutely right. People don't operate just on the one goal of making as much money as possible.
Yeah.
We're much deeper than that. And the difference is as simple as anthropology. Humans are animals at the end of the day. Corporations are not. Corporations, I think, everything about a corporation exists in our minds, and they only have value because we associate value to it. And you could say the same thing about money. And at the end of the day, they're just little pieces of paper. Well, in our case, pieces of plastic.
Shout out to Canadian money.
Yeah, great colors. But no, I think that's all in your head. Money doesn't mean anything unless you know that it means something. But I think humanity goes a little bit deeper than that, and maybe that's not accurately represented in our political system today, and I think that's a real shame.
Something that I want to ask you, and it might be less so in the Canadian system, but this idea of one person that runs everything, that we have this person that we put on such a pedestal. Like we don't have the same adoring sense that maybe the States has for their president, where like they view the president very similar in some ways that I would associate as a deity. Like you can't speak ill of the president. It's like, don't take the president's name in vain. It's like the commandment that they have. But it's less so in Canada. I think we're a little bit more open to criticizing, and we're able to see our prime minister as a person. Maybe not so much with Trudeau, and because Trudeau is has a fandom. He's like a celebrity.
I don't think that there's that much difference anymore. I think maybe if you go back 50 years, it was less so. But I think now in the U.S., the politics has become so much more polarized that there's a lot of people speaking out against Donald Trump. I don't think you can argue that Democrats see Donald Trump as some form of deity. Yeah. And, they pay him all this respect because he's the president. Because, honestly, I don't think that's respect he deserves. Yeah. I think we've seen the opposite thing happening in Canada since Pierre Trudeau, as power has been sort of more amassed in the PMO, and all the decisions come down from the Prime Minister's office, and all the MPs and even the cabinet ministers don't have a lot of say in the way the government works. I think we're developing more that cult of personality. Yeah. I think with Stephen Harper, behind the scenes is when that got fully cemented into place, where the Prime Minister is in charge of the government and everyone defers to the Prime Minister. With Trudeau, it's less about the politics and more about the appearances. He really does have that star power about him. Every time people see him, they run over and try and take a selfie with him. And I think that is a huge problem. I really if you look at the Constitution, which is a document that has its flaws, granted, but there's no mention of the Prime Minister. It's not a part of our political system at all that we have a Prime Minister who is in charge of the government. All it stipulates is that parties have leaders and they have cabinet members who sort of run the government from within. And above that, you have 338 MPs. If our system were working as it was supposed to, then each of those MPs would be independent and not have a political party, and they would be there representing their communities and coming together to form laws that benefit Canada. And, there wouldn't be such a thing as a confidence motion, and there wouldn't be such a thing as government and opposition parties. It'd just be each MP voting for what they think is best for the country and what they think is best for their constituency, and the laws of Canada emerged from that. So I think we're so far away from that system where you ask someone today, who did you vote for? They tell you, I voted for Trudeau. No,
it's really true, because especially when you look on like Twitter and Instagram, and for all the incredible failures that Donald Trump is as a president and as a person, they look to the shining example that is Canada, the greatness of Canada with their awesome prime minister
he's so cool and so hip.
Yeah, and in many ways I do I can't be dishonest. I do appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that he's not Donald fucking Trump. And I appreciate the fact that he is in many ways a normal human being, but it is we've gone a little bit too much where it's like the fact that just because Trudeau isn't Trump doesn't immediately make him that an amazing leader. He has flaws that we should look to criticize as you would any other leader.
Well, I think definitely Justin Trudeau is better than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
The man
just to make that as clear as possible. As clear as possible.
I am not saying anything of that sort.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at Justin Trudeau on his own as a politician, he's a slime ball. Honestly, I've never seen Justin Trudeau honestly answer a question in his entire life. And I think, say what you will about Stephen Harper, but at least he was clear about what he wanted to do. He wanted to take all the power for himself and support all the oil industries and all the big businesses at the expense of the environment and the poor people. And he was very clear about that. And I think everyone understood that. And that's why people rebelled against him. And there were all these get Harper out at all cost, anyone but conservative movements in the last election.
Yeah.
Politically, I don't think Justin Trudeau's policies are that different. They may be slightly more to the left, but at the end of the day, he's not doing anything for the least fortunate. He's not doing anything on climate change. He's actually adopted the same targets that the Conservative government had, and he's about as likely to achieve them as Harper was, which is to say, not at all. But people, I think, don't see it that way because Justin Trudeau isn't honest about it. He doesn't get up and say that's what he wants to do. He gets up and says, I'm protecting the environment by building this pipeline because, by growing the economy, we can better protect the environment at some point in the future. And I think we don't question that enough in our society. Maybe we're too polite as Canadians, but we take him at his word when his word means nothing. And I think that really is the biggest problem that I have with the current government.
To switch gears a little bit, but very much in that same vein, I wanted to talk to you about environmentalism and about the influence of oil in Canada and just kind of your opinion on that. If you can frame that in a way, to talk about how you feel about oil's involvement in Canadian politics and what you would like to see us as if we are truly an environmentally concerned society, what we can look forward to or push for as kind of a goal.
Well, I think anything when we talk about environmental protection and how environmentally conscious Canada is, we have to remind ourselves that we are the third worst country in the world when it comes to pollution per capita. Australia and Saudi Arabia have us beat because Australia still relies on coal for 80% of its power. And Saudi Arabia is entirely based on oil and nothing else. But after that, it's Canada. In fact, if Alberta were its own country or Saskatchewan, either one of them, they would have 4 times more emissions per capita than any other country on the face of the earth. So to say that we're doing well is not at all true. And I think we have to remember that when we're talking about where we have to go. Because obviously the oil and gas industry is a big part of the Canadian economy. And it's a big part of people's lives, especially in Alberta, where, something like 20% of the population is dependent on the oil industry directly in some way for their livelihoods. But I think the first step has to be saying no more. We cannot expand the industry in any way. So the first thing I would do if I was, which I am not, but if I was, I would say no more natural gas, no more pipelines, no more oil refineries. We can keep running the infrastructure that we have for now in the interim, but nothing new going from there. I heard the argument all the time that pipelines are safer than rail. I don't agree with that necessarily, but either way, you build a pipeline is permanent, and it always is going to be there running oil through to the coast.
Mm-hmm.
If you ship oil on a train and then suddenly you don't need oil anymore, you can just stop running the trains.
Yeah.
And just like that, the oil industry disappears from the port of Vancouver, the port in New Brunswick. So I think step one is stopping the expansion. I think after that, you have to look at how we transform away. And I'm by no means the best expert in this, but I think it has to come down to the government at this point. If we want to do it right and we want to do it quickly, you have to invest in skills retraining for all the people who will be displaced if we start charging more tariffs on the oil industry and we start cracking down on fossil fuels. And, you know, in the same vein, we have to provide incentives for people to switch away.
Yeah.
We have to build more public transit in cities,
Yeah.
Invest in electric cars. And I think with a little bit of action and a little bit of willpower, it's really not that difficult to move away from oil very quickly. If you look at power generation, wind is by far the most efficient, followed, nuclear is the most efficient, but it has its own problems.
Yeah.
But after nuclear, it's wind, and then solar, and then hydroelectric, and there's so many other options than using fossil fuels, and it's just a question of funding the transformation, funding the shift, and once it's started, it's going to happen on its own, just as a product of the economy.
Yeah, it very much just needs that initial push, but and like that push may be like enormous to make for the entire country to switch off of it. So I'm in no way trying to mitigate the need for the power that you would need for that kind of push, but you get the ball rolling.
I think the term that comes to mind is short-term pain for long-term gain.
Yeah,
and I think I really don't like it when we talk about the environment from an economic standpoint, because I think it detracts from the fact that, you know, this is our home planet and we should probably stop it from dying.
Yeah.
But even looking at it from an economic perspective, if we make the investment right away and we're one of the first countries to do that and we get it started, A, maybe we'll set a good example for everyone else, but B, down the road, when everyone else starts to transform, either because they come to their senses or because we actually start running out of oil and they just can't use it anymore because there's none left, then we're going to be in a fantastic place because we've already funded the transition. We've already got everything working and in place. But I think that's not going to happen. I think Canada and the United States are going to be some of the last countries to go. I think it's going to start happening in Europe, where it's already happening, and then I think it's going to start happening in countries in Asia and Africa where they never had this consumerist oil-based society in the first place. And they can
be the leaders.
And I think the dominance of the West is going to come to an end if we continue the way we're going, and that might not necessarily be a bad thing.
That's incredibly, like, I'm in no way saying that I don't think that'll happen, but it's incredibly disheartening to hear that and to imagine it, the possibility that, you know, for all of the things that we love about Canada so much, that we got this probably one of the most important things so wrong, and for so long. And you've had so many people that are screaming it, and it's not just now. Like, there have been people since like the 50s and the 60s who have been like, we need to do something about the environment. This is not good. And it's just still just a maintaining of the pace rather than trying something new. Like the aversion to switching gears in all facets of any parliamentary system, whether it's in Canada or it's in the US, that aversion to change is a really scary thing. The idea that we need to maintain what we're doing because it's worked, but not this idea that while it has worked, it might not work in the future.
And, well, I mean, I'd raise questions as to whether or not it ever actually worked.
Yeah.
But, I mean, from a purely societal perspective, yes, it worked. Especially in Alberta, and I think you can see that present day. The government and the society of Canada, especially Alberta, has become so engulfed with oil, so very intricately tied to oil, that breaking that bond is almost impossible. Like, we have a government approving pipelines and the official opposition yelling at them for not approving pipelines fast enough or quickly enough.
Yeah.
Or for telling them they took too long to approve the pipeline. And that's like 75% of the Canadian Parliament right there. And even outside of that, even in society, I talk to people, even in North Vancouver, who, I like to think of myself being from Vancouver. Everyone cares about the environment.
Yeah.
Is vegan and eats sushi and drinks kale. But there are people who fundamentally believe that oil is the way of the future, and there's nothing that's ever going to change that.
It's funny how the way of the past is now also the way of the future.
I remember when I was at Page, actually Alex Wozni MP, Mr. Blaine Calkins from Red Deer, Alberta, he gave a speech on the floor of the House of Commons about how oil was such a great thing because it's saving all the whales that we used to use for oil, and now we can just get it out of the ground. And how, he would never trust a plane that was fueled by electricity to get him across the ocean because good old-fashioned oil is the way to go.
Wow.
And it was kind of a joke, but he was completely serious about that. He's also telling us how, because of the oil industry, we're burning less trees. So by using fossil fuels, we're saving the forests. So I think...
Oh, that gives me a headache.
There are people... This is a man who got about 65% of the vote and is running in the last election. So there are people that have this fundamental belief, and I think it's really hard to change that. Change in general is hard. That's the reason our electoral system is the same it's been since Confederation, or even before Confederation. It's the reason that the composition of the Senate of Canada has never changed. And even though there's now 5 million people in BC and 1 million people in New Brunswick still has double the amount of senators that BC has. And, you can talk about pretty much any issue in politics, not even just in Canada, but across the world. And the main reason things don't happen is because it's not the way they're already happening. And it's easier not to change the system than to change the system.
On that very happy note, to finish, I just want to ask you, do you ever think that you'll run again? Whether it's in the same riding or in a different riding or for something else, but do you ever think you'll run as a political candidate again?
Absolutely. I was surprised when I was running in the spring that people asked me that before the election even happened. Like, assuming my eventual defeat, they'd say, will you run again? Will you commit to doing this again? And at first I started skirting around the question, but I think the answer is definitely yes. I will absolutely run again. I think the more people that get involved, the better. And if nobody wants to hear what I have to say, then maybe I'll have to learn that lesson the hard way, because I haven't quite picked up on it yet. I don't know when. I'd like to have a little bit more organization. Maybe have a real campaign manager that isn't my mom next time. We'll see. Not that my mom isn't great, because she is, but she's also my mom, so there's
shout out to all the moms that no matter what you want to do, they will always support you. Shout out to those moms.
Amen. Yeah, so I think the more people that get out there and vote, the better. That's a great way, I think, to conclude our evening tonight. Is a message to anyone listening to this podcast. I'm talking to you. You should run for office, because if you don't, who will? You'll just have to keep listening to me otherwise.
Josh, this is 100% been one of my favorites. Seriously, I honestly commend you for you carry yourself very well in interviews. This is not to belittle any of the guests that I've had, but including myself, very nervous in that first interaction. But you take it in stride. You are a great interviewee. It's and your answers are very clear and coherent. One of the best.
Chalk it up to years of experience.
Josh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If people want to find you, can they find you anywhere or?
Absolutely. My Facebook page for the Green Party is still active.
Nice.
You can Google my name along with North Vancouver, and that'll pop up. I still have a website. I even still have an email address. So, email joshua.johnson@bcgreens.ca and you'll find me.
Okay, that's a wrap. Josh, thank you very much once again. Couldn't have asked for a better one.
Thank you for having me, Lucas. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, ciao. See you guys later. Bye.